episode is all about 20 of the best must-read books for triathletes. And because I am one person, I decided to ask our Triathlon Nutrition Academy community to help me tell you about some of the top books that you should read as a triathlete. So we have 10 of us on our recording today, and we are going to try and not break the internet to do this. But I asked them to help me compile a list of their favorites. And so they're joining me today. Say hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Woo! Sounds so excited. So we're going to dive straight in the deep end. Whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or some information, we've got some really good recommendations for you. And if you're out on the wind trainer or going for a long run or something while you're listening to this right now, don't worry about getting out a pen and paper. I'm going to compile the list for you into a free download. If you go to dietitianapproved.com/books, you'll be able to get that for free. So I'm going to kick us off because everyone's a little bit nervous. There's a little bit of wee in pants happening right now. So I'm going to go first just to make sure that, everyone's okay. We're going to set the tone. So you may have heard me talk about our first recommended book today. It's called Up to Speed by Christine Yu. And she was actually on the podcast quite a few episodes back. If you go back to episode 130, she's actually a sports journalist with an interest in health and science, which, love, woman after my own heart. But she has a particular interest in the female athlete. And she has done an excellent job of compiling the research to date on all things female athlete. So she talks about not only nutrition and training, but also through our lifespan, through pregnancy, postpartum, and the joys of perimenopause and menopause. She talks about training. She talks about sports bras and the evolution of those. And, as a female that really needs sports bras, there has been a huge evolution in those in my training history. So it's definitely a must read for any female athlete. But I also think for coaches, whether you're male or female, and you have female athletes, I think it would be a great recommended book for you to add to your list as well. And hey, if you're a male listening, it's also a great read for you because chances are you may have a female in your life somewhere doing something that is active. So not only for the female athlete, but definitely grab that one. I'll pop the link in the show notes to have a read. I thought from, an evidence-based perspective and my perspective, she did an excellent job on the nutrition chapter in particular, when there's some very noisy voices in the nutrition space for female athletes at the moment. And she did a great job of sort of being impartial to the big ends of the spectrum. So that is number one. Kicking us off, warming us up with our first book recommendation. Moving on to our second, I'm going to ask Mrs. Pastor to do number two.
Certainly. All right. Number 2, How Bad Do You Want It? Mastering the Psychology of Mind Over Muscle by Matt Fitzgerald. This is a book I probably discovered 5 or 6 years ago, and honestly, I read it every season. And I've started assigning homework to my athletes to read it as they approach and enter race season. There's about a dozen chapters in here, and each chapter is about a different athlete who struggles in some way in the mental and physical techniques that they use to break down barriers, reach the next level, and achieve great things. There's a chapter on Cadel Evans. There's a chapter on Thomas Voeckler, if any of you are Tour de France fans. There's a chapter on Siri Lindley, who was ITU triathlon world champion. So there's a chapter for everyone, and it's going to help you take it to the next level and figure out what you can do, what's holding you back, and how you can push through. And I did have a second book to recommend. This one is Let Your Mind Run by Dina Castor. She is a United States marathon runner. She started running cross country in college. She became a professional runner after college in various distances, but took a medal in the Athens Olympics at the marathon. And it just goes through her story and how she discovered that training is a huge component in what we do, but how we talk to ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, and the power of positivity in life and in training, and how that's going to help, and how that helped her break barriers, how it's going to help you break barriers. One of my favorite passages, because she's always talking about how positive she needs to be, is she was out on a training run, and I only tell this because it cracks me up every time. She was out on a training run with a friend of hers, training for, I'm not even sure which Olympics. It was hot, it was humid, they were running hills at altitude, and he just commented, "This sucks." She's like, "You need to be more positive," and his response was, "I'm positive this sucks." And when I'm doing a hard run, that's what I think about is I'm positive this sucks. And it cracks me up, it breaks the ice, and I can keep going. So anyway, just the mantras and positivity is what this book is all about.
Yeah, good one. So a good mindset sort of one if you're
Right.
in a dark hole,
Absolutely.
which we all get into sometimes.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Pastor. Moving on to our fourth book recommendation, we have Lynn, all the way from Adelaide, South Australia. That's one thing that you'll get on this podcast, actually, is accents from all over the world. So see if you can pick where people are from. Maybe I won't tell you. All right, over to you, Lynn.
Okay. My book is called Fast Over 50. And who doesn't want to be fast over 50, right? So it's based for the endurance athlete who wants to remain competitive into their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It's written by Joe Friel. Now, he's a master athlete himself, so he has first-hand experience on going through the ageing process. And it's a very easy-to-read book. I find I pick it up and I put it down and then I just get involved and I just keep reading. It's set in layman's terms. So it starts off what we go through as we age, and everybody's going to go through the aging process, and it's a little doom and gloom because, you know, it is. So the interesting part here is that he has strategies for the athlete to delay this aging process, to help us to become competitive and remain in the sport that we love. So he talks about a lot of things about modifying training and strength work and increasing muscle strength, periodization in your training program, and all of these things put together creates a modification that we have to do as we get older. So I find it really interesting. People have said to me in the past, "Oh, you're too old, you should slow down." Not if you read this book, okay?
Right on.
That's right.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, just ignore
Awesome.
what people say. It gave me the encouragement and the confidence to keep racing into
Awesome.
into beyond 50. So, yeah, and keep
Awesome.
enjoying the sport you love.
Yeah, good one, Lynn. Fast over
Awesome.
50. Good for
Yeah.
anyone 50 plus, but maybe also in those years heading into that age bracket to prepare yourself for the half
What's
century.
to come.
Yep. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Lynn. All right, number 5 is over to you, Tony.
So my book is from the voice of Iron Man, Mike Riley. It's Finding Your Voice. This book is best done in the Audible version. He actually reads the book, so it's his voice. And it's packed with stories of Ironman finishers at all the events that he's done. That's people that have grabbed his attention. And it's their story told by Mike Riley himself. And in the Audible version, it is his voice. So it's his voice of their story, I guess. It's a lot. There's a lot of people in there. Some of them you heard. He tells the story of why the "You Are an Iron Man" thing came about, and talks about that person a lot. And he talks about some others that have gone through some hard things in their lives and have gone on to finish the Ironman World Championship. And some of them didn't make it the first time, so there's repeats and stuff like that. So. Pretty good book, but yeah, if you're going to get it, I recommend the Audible version.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sure he's got lots of stories to tell. He would have seen so many finish lines and so many people, and you know, there is a wide spectrum of people that do an Ironman. I love that we get to share that with people. All right, good one. So good one for sort of motivation, inspiration, and just to learn some stories about other people doing Ironman and know that you could do it yourself, right? Anyone could do an Ironman. You just need to get your nutrition right. All right, moving on to number 6, number 7, and number 8, because he's a little bit of an overachiever, but handing over to you, Chad.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so my number 6 is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They are both Navy SEALs, and you might be thinking like, okay, so what do Navy SEALs and triathlon have in common? I'll get to that, but the subtitle is how U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win, and each chapter is kind of broken into 2 parts. The first part, they go through their experiences serving in Iraq and missions they've done and lessons that they've learned in each of those. And then the second part, they've started consulting with businesses, companies, individuals, how they've applied those lessons through their consulting to business, to real life. And, as a triathlete, you can think of it like, you've got a mission, you're training for that mission, and there's the training, the preparation, the execution. They talk about mastering your craft and the things that you do every day. And then the lessons that you learn, like, you have to be prepared. What can you control? What can't you control? And how can you plan for the things when they go wrong, and learn from those things, and be prepared for those. So, I love this book. It's a great read, and it applies a different perspective to our sport of triathlon and nutrition. So being prepared when things go wrong. Like one of the things I've learned through this program is to always have a bottle of water on your bike.
Always be prepared.
Always be prepared. Yes. Okay. So number 7. Number 7. Breathe by James Nestor, The New Science of a Lost Art. I love this book. It's a little more scientific, but the inside cover reads that, like, it doesn't matter how much you exercise or how you eat. If you're not breathing properly, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes through some of the history of how breathing has evolved and how it's affected our physiological development. But the meat in the middle is an experiment that he participated in where they basically they obstruct the nose and they have to breathe through their mouth for the whole first half of the experiment, and they measure physiologically what happens to them, their health, through all these different markers, like their blood gases, like blood pressure, their hormones, inflammation, all this stuff, bacteria count, all this stuff, and it's fascinating. And their performance, they stay on the same schedule of sleep, eating, and diet. And then they take it off and focus on nose breathing, and the difference is amazing. And applying that to triathlon, like, how can you breathe better? How can you harness that? And especially in recovery, like breathing, how do you breathe when you sleep? Like, that totally affects your performance and your recovery for those next workouts the next day. And then there's a bunch of breathing exercises at the end of the book too that you can actually put into practice. So that's really cool.
Yeah, cool. Some people are like, well, I thought I breathed okay. Like, why have I got something else I have to work on now? Damn it.
Right,
But
right.
it is pretty cool. And yeah, fascinating, the science. So is the goal to be a nose breather as much as you can?
Yes. And how you breathe. Like, are you breathing from your chest, your diaphragm? Are you tense? Are you shallow breathing? Are you taking deep breaths? All that kind of stuff. So it's very cool.
Yeah, I noticed that everyone just closed their mouths and tried to breathe more so through their nose when you said that.
Mouth breathers. Okay, so my 8th book is Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, which is a very popular book. It totally applies to triathlon and long distance running specifically. Many of you may have already read it, but it's such a good read. It's entertaining. It touches on some of the history of shoe development, but it's really a narrative story. And I loved this when I was doing really long training runs, training for Ironman. You're out there 2+ hours, and listening to this book on audio as I was running just made things go by quicker, and also helped me focus on my running, because it's all about running. And the characters in the book they are characters. Long distance runners are characters. So it's a fantastic read. I highly recommend it.
Do you recommend reading that one while you go for long runs?
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Make
Yes.
you run faster, run better?
Yes, but it's also distracts you from the pain.
Yeah. All of these books, I'm sure, could help distract you from the pain. All right, number 9. We are moving on back to see if you can pick this accent. But Jared, you're up with number 9.
Hey Taryn, my book, I've got Be Iron Fit by Don Fink. I stumbled upon this probably a couple of years ago, brand into the sport of triathlon, and I had a running background, but I had zero experience in the swim, was terrified of it. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was 9 years old, didn't know what I was doing, and just sort of stumbled into it. And there was just plans just to give you the foundation to understand what the sport's about, and to get your mindset and your foundation built. There was time management plans in there that, I was like, I work 50, 60 hours a week. How am I going to fit in all this extra training? 20 hours a week. I found out I can squeeze in brick runs in the morning before work. I can slip out on my lunch break and go for a swim. In the evenings, I can do, the wife watches her Netflix movie. I'll do my 2 hours on the bike. So you just sort of juggle and navigate all these things that I just never understood, never sort of figured I could schedule it in. There's training plans in that I still use today. I've sort of imported into Excel. It depends on what you want. Do you want to just finish it in the minimum time? Do you want to get a podium? Do you want to be competitive? So having a spin with that, sort of understanding the background of the sport, better time management skills for me. There was a few little nutrition tips as well to sort of build the foundation. Gets you started, but it doesn't give you the fine tuning like Miss Taryn does. But no, it really got me as a brand new beginner into the sport, not knowing where to go, what to do. I found it was a great read and sort of put me on the path to better success.
Okay, cool. And do you recommend that one for people just starting in the sport, or maybe looking at doing their first Ironman distance?
Yeah, look, probably both. I'd probably say it's really good for people brand new into the sport, whether you just want to do super sprints or you want to do just Olympic distance, whatever's in there. But definitely for 70.3 or full distance, I found a lot of good information there. I still keep it in my car and sort of dig it out on work trips and read it on the planes. And I always get something new out of it every time I go back to it. But yeah, it's a great read. And he was I think he's like 40 something Ironman competitions that he's done. He's a trainer now. So coming from the experience of somebody that sort of has excelled in that sport was really good for me to have some tips and tricks to pick off of.
Awesome. Alrighty, we are halfway through our book recommendations. If you want to go and grab the free download that has all of them in a list, make sure you go to dietitianapproved.com/books to grab that. To take us through to number 10, we have Steve. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, how you doing, Taryn?
Good, thank you.
So, my book is called The Alter Ego Effect, and it's written by Todd Herman. And Todd Herman is a good old Canadian boy, as I am. And he is a high-performance coach, and he works with professional athletes, Olympic athletes, business people, to get them to be their best. And so his entire strategy, if you will, is using this concept called the alter ego. And we all know that everyone's got an alter ego. It was something discovered by this philosopher guy a long time ago. And so I love this book because in triathlon, again being a Canadian, I really admire Lionel Sanders. And he puts himself in a bunch of hurt and he perseveres. He keeps going. He's stubborn. And so the alter ego that for me, I think of myself when I'm out there doing my training runs and I feel like, oh God, this is painful and I don't want to do this. And I think, you know what, Lionel Sanders is doing this. I can do this too. And so I kind of become Lionel Sanders. And that's what Todd Herman does with his coaching clients. And these are like high level elite athletes who they develop an alter ego, or some of them have had their own alter ego, and he just works with that. So it's all about, creating that alter ego, somebody that's been special. There's a story behind, like Lionel Sanders was a guy who many years ago was he was abusing drugs. He was in a downward spiral. And so triathlon, of course, kind of saved him. But I think about his story, and I think, wow, the significance of what he's done, and going from where he was to where he is today. I mean, that's pretty special. So we can all benefit from having an alter ego. Who's your hero? Who do you want to become? So you can think about Clark Kent and Superman, right? Superman was the actual person, and Clark Kent was the alter ego. He was on Earth, trying to not be noticed, but he was studying, what humans were like. So the alter ego is, your other self, your other friend, if you will. And you can develop that alter ego to help you, reach higher levels of doing what you want to do. So as I say in triathlon, for me, I think about, as I mentioned, a guy like Lionel Sanders. I look up to him in terms of, what he's done, how he's done it, and who doesn't like Lionel Sanders? Because he wears his heart on his sleeve. So I'm out there running and biking, and I think, I want to be like Lionel Sanders. I want to, I'll never reach the levels that he has reached, of course, but it just gives me the inspiration, and it gets me to keep going when I don't want to keep going. When things suck, and you just want to, like running for me has always been difficult. It's been painful. It's never fun. But I was running the other day, and honestly, I was thinking, okay, what would Lionel Sanders be doing? And I thought, frick this, I ran my 12K run, and I was doing these intervals, and they were frickin' hard, and they hurt. But they didn't hurt as bad as they used to hurt, and it's a big mental thing. So that's the alter ego for me, and I highly recommend the book. I'm going to reread the book. I read it not too long ago, and I like myself, I need to read a book a couple of times to really kind of get the gist of things. But I think I've tried to do my best to describe what the concept is. So.
Yeah, cool. I think it'd be a good one to, switch into race mode in a way, or if, you have to find your inner mongrel to get through some deep, dark holes sometimes out on the race course. So it might be nice to have an alter ego on your shoulder being like, stop being a wuss, get amongst it, go and do it.
I think that's exactly what Todd Herman would say to an athlete. That's exactly how that would be the best use of that, the best application of that for sure, on race day. And I feel like that, like I know when I've done events in the past, and like I've, shit the bed on some races with the run, felt like crap. And I had conversations with myself, but the alter ego allows you to have a conversation with your alter ego, and that alter ego, I think, will inspire you and keep you going, right?
Yeah, awesome, Steve. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
So number 11, I almost didn't let her put this in here, but it's Raw by Stacey Sims, and I know that this book has changed the landscape for female athletes. But I get a little bit frustrated by the very specific nutrition recommendations inside with no evidence to back it up. But I let her put it in because she's so passionate about it. So, Becky, tell us why every athlete, not only just the females, should read Raw.
Man, you know what? If you're a woman, if you're a man, it talks to tracking your cycles. I mean, some of her nutrition shit, whatever. But
yeah, some of it is
just
good,
knowing,
but a lot of it is not.
But she was a game changer. She was a trailblazer, and any
Yeah.
male coach needs to read it to understand that women have periods and we're not little men, and we need to understand, and they need to understand we got shit going on that they will never comprehend. And we also have to own our own shit, and we have to track cycles and understand that having our period isn't the worst fucking thing in the world when you're racing an Ironman. It's actually our superpower.
Moving on to number 12 with Chris.
All right.
Yeah, you're
so
up,
number
Chris.
12 is David Goggins' first book, Can't Hurt Me. It's an autobiographical self-help book, but it's an amazing chronicle, actually, of this guy's life story and mental and physical challenges that he overcame. And it really, I think, is in two parts. The first part is the beginning of his life, where he comes from this broken home, the abuse he sustains, and then grows to a young person that's just giving up and struggling in life, and gets to a point that many of us, particularly the endurance folks, get in their life where they're like, shit, no more, I gotta change. And then he just begins to reach for what most would consider the unattainable. And it's the story of him breaking himself to basically unlock his superpowers and become this, what he called the hardest man in the world. And there are some themes in this book through his story of becoming a Navy SEAL and then going out for Delta Force and achieving these ultra endurance events, overcoming adversity, becoming accountable. So he creates a thing called the accountability mirror. So this ties into like Jocko Willim's book of extreme ownership. He put on the mirror the things that he was weak at and he faced every day, had to address it. He looked at it every day. Callousing his mind, he believed that just like your feet and your hands can get calluses, you can callous the brain to better endure suffering and pain. And 40% rule. Lots of lessons in this, and it's basically learning to unlock your mind so that you can achieve the extraordinary.
Spoken like a true Navy SEAL, right? Callous the mind and just dig deeper.
That's right.
This guy, I have never heard of this guy, and I'm going to add these books to my reading list because he just sounds like a weapon. I really want to understand his mind.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
So the second book that he wrote is called Never Finished. Number 13, Never Finished, Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within. So it's really a continuation on of his journey. And it talks about he talks about continual self-improvement, the importance of suffering, which is a central theme in his life and in his books, and that there's value in that embracing pain and hardship is crucial for personal growth. Mastering the mind, as you said, taking ownership again, visualization, power of visualization. He gives lots of examples, and this book is set up a little differently where there's interactive components and him speaking and another author involved. So there's things to work on. And then basically staying hungry. So never being satisfied. You've always got more. And a famous thing that he says is 40% rule. When you think you've reached, when your mind is telling you you can't do any more, you're only 40% of your capacity. So
Yes.
it's really touching. It touches something inside of you to keep reaching deeper, to go for more.
Love it. I love this guy. I feel like we'd be mates.
Yeah.
Okay, good one. 2 extra books to add to the reading list. They're definitely going to be added to mine. All right, we're going to stick with Chris because he's a little bit of an overachiever as well. But number 14, Chris.
Number 14 is a book that I think is a great compliment to David Goggins. It's called The Mountain Is You, Transforming Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery. And Brianna Wiest this is a self-help book, but it's really a metaphor for overcoming how we sabotage ourselves as we reach for something greater than we are today. And so she gives great examples of what the mental components are, the subconscious, the conscious, gut feelings and emotions, how they work against us if we're not aware of what's happening, to where we put brakes on the things that we're trying to achieve. The book goes into embracing the discomfort again and crushing that mountain. That mountain is not an external force, but it's actually our things that we stack against ourselves and overcoming ourselves to become a better person, a bigger, stronger person, becoming self-aware so that you can heal. And she gives techniques of healing and how to stop dragging the shit from your past into your present that's slowing you down. And then transforming your mindset and being compassionate with yourself to transform into what David Goggins is telling us we can all be.
Yeah, Psychology 101.
Yeah,
Sounds amazing.
it really is.
All right, we're up to number 15. We've only got 20 books in this recommended list, but honestly, there are so many books you could read as a triathlete. So perhaps we will jump on another time and do another 20 because this has just been so much fun. But to give us the book to read for number 15, we have Jake. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you, and hi. Look, my book that I recommend is Endure, which has been written by Alex Hutchinson, and Alex was an elite cross-country runner and for Canada, but also he's also a Cambridge trained physicist, and so look, the backdrop to this was he was trying to go sub 4 minutes for the 1500 meters, and he was stuck at the 4:01 for years and years and years, and a timekeeper actually gave him some wrong splits and which were lower than 4 minutes, and he started to think that he could actually run a sub 4 minute 1500 meter race, and this kind of triggered his investigation into kind of the power of the mind. And so, look, the basic premise of the book is that it's the brain that dictates your limits and how far you can push. And I suppose my interest in it is having just completed my third Ironman, and regardless of how well prepared or unprepared I've been, inevitably at around the 30k mark, the bad monkey turns up, telling you that there's no possible way you'll finish. No one cares. You need to stop. And look, his book has really helped me just unlock some of those mental limits, which I think are just really critical in endurance sports. And he does talk about a whole range of, simple tools, and they're things like, internal self-talk, and having words and mantras that actually help you work through those very, very difficult moments. So those things have actually been really, practical tools that I've actually been able to use to help deal with things like getting through Ironmans. So it's a really well-written, well-researched book that's had a, really profound impact on me.
Yeah, cool. And I know a lot of people on this podcast have read that book, and it comes highly recommended. So definitely add it to your reading list. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the real overachiever of the day. Kelly has got 4 book recommendations for us, and he had a longer list. He had like 10. I was like, dude, you got to cut it down. You got to share it out. So number 16, take us away, Kelly.
Okay, number 16, the first book is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And of the 4 books that I'm going to talk about, I like this book the best because it's well-researched and well-written, and it gives really good examples of how to develop grit. And I think when you look at the title and you see grit, and you understand that grit's really important to achieve things, you really want to understand, well, how do I get it? How do I improve it? So the book goes on to explain what grit's about and how Angela has done a bunch of testing and things research over the years to understand how important it is. And one of the things that Angela points out in the book is that talent says nothing about a person's grit. And that was something that I found interesting, because our potential is one thing, but what we do with it is something that's really different. And it comes down to the grit is really what helps us progress in life and to achieve things. It comes down to the grit that we have. So how do you develop grit, as is outlined in the book? There's some deliberate practice that you can do that she explains in the book, and it basically has 4 areas. You have a clearly defined stretch goal, you have full concentration and effort on that goal, you have immediate and informative feedback. And these are things that if you're a coach, you're a triathlete, or if you have a coach, that you can use to improve your triathletic efforts. But in addition to immediate informative feedback, you can use repetition with reflection and refinement. So Chad, that's on the podcast with us today, he's my coach, right? And so he's probably thinking, yeah, Kelly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about these kinds of things here. But one of the things I really noticed in the book that I liked is, especially for me as an older age group athlete, is that grit increases with age. And of course, I like graphs, and I have a graph in the book that shows this, and it shows that as you get older, up into my age range, that grit really starts to increase rapidly compared to your younger years. So it's kind of this encouraging book for someone like me to say, hey, I really ought to spend more time looking at my grit, trying to figure out how to improve it, even though it's probably going to come naturally with age, but it's pretty important to help me be successful in all the things I'm working at.
I love that you've probably got a grit spreadsheet going on now.
Yeah, I do, with all my other spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, Angela talks about in the book that the grittier a person is, the more likely they're going to enjoy a healthy emotional life. And she has a graph for that too, which of course I like to just sit and look at.
Of course she does. All right, number 17, Kelly.
Yeah, my next one is Do Hard Things, who's written by Steve Magnus. He's also written a book, The Science of Running, Peak Performance, and The Passion Paradox. So you might be familiar with those books. But in here, he talks about how we get resilience wrong and the surprising science behind real toughness. He goes on to explain that toughness is something that we look at how toughness is displayed in boardrooms or in athletics and other places. And the old model is typically characterized by something you might see in the military where you have some drill sergeant yelling at you or something where somebody's just hardcore, right? You got to tough it out. And in the book, they go on to explain that that's really not the way to do things, that the new model just moves away from that altogether and starts to look at just 4 pillars of what they call resilience, which is you ditch the facade and embrace reality, listen to your body, respond instead of react, and transcend discomfort. So the book goes on to talk about other examples of good role models. So, for example, Pete Carroll from Seattle Seahawks and basketball coach John Wooden from the UCLA Bruins, and how they did business, and how that different approach, you can get much better results. And I like that because, I spent a number of years in the military, starting out with the Marine Corps, and I really never liked that toughness approach. It just never settled well, even though I stayed in the military for a long time. It just never settled well. So whenever I read Do Hard Things, it became just something I embraced as a meaningful way to try to treat people and do business. It was a lot different than the way I had learned to do it years ago. I think with that was all I was going to say about that particular book.
Oh, cool. All right, moving on to number 18, Kelly.
Number 18 is Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. So Hidden Potential by Adam Grant is a book that spends a lot of time talking about how do you understand what your potential is and how do you develop it. And it's got a lot of really good illustrations in there and stories about how to pull out your potential. And the premise is that it's not where you start, but where or how far you go with your potential. And so they spend a lot of time in the book talking about the person that spends a lot of time getting to where they're going, even though they have a lot of ups and downs in life and they have a lot of troubles that may delay them getting to the end point. The real potential is for those people that stick in there, kind of like grit, where you just hang in there and keep working at it for a long time to get to that successful endpoint that you're after. They point out early in the book that one of the things that really help people be successful later in life is how your kindergarten teacher helped you and basically how experienced your kindergarten teacher was when you were in kindergarten. What they show is that if you had a more experienced kindergarten teacher, then later in life, you would have higher earning potential. And they measured that by waiting till the kids later in life got to the 4th and the 8th grade. And they went back and they measured things like how proactive were they, how pro-social were they, how disciplined were they, and how determined were they. And they all had improved scores in those areas depending on the experience level of their kindergarten teacher when they were like 4 or 5 years old. Yeah. So it's interesting how they look at this approach and use that throughout the book to explain how you can draw out your hidden potential. And I really enjoyed the book. Again, I think I'd recommend it for triathletes to understand ways to help improve your own performance. And this is the book that talked about listening to audiobooks versus reading a hardcover. If you listen to the audiobook, you retain about 59% of the content. If you read a book, you can retain about 81% of the content. And then as Taryn mentioned, if you do both simultaneously, maybe, you retain an even higher amount.
Yeah, cool. All right, bring it home with your last recommendation, Kelly, number 19.
Yeah, the last book, Start With Why, is a book from Simon Sinek. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. And this book, when you start with why, was really interesting because it's initially kind of oriented towards businesses and explaining how businesses can be successful if they start with why. And he has an approach in here where he talks about that you have a why, how, and what approach. And although the book is about business, you can apply it to many things that you do because later in the book it explains that for the businesses that understand why they're doing what they're doing, the ones that are able to communicate it well, often people align themselves with a business's why, and so they attract those kinds of people. And so understanding your why as a business owner is really helpful for communicating with people to share what your vision is or your product. And so if I take an example as a triathlete of businesses that I think do pretty well with explaining their why and that I align myself with because I agree with their why, is the Triathlon Triathlon Training Program. I really think they have a good understanding of their why, and I believe that the training that I do with them is very meaningful because I believe in it. I think they communicate their why very well, and they talk the talk. I also can say the same thing about the Triathlon Nutrition Academy. I think the why is well understood. And whenever I joined Triathlon Nutrition Academy, the why was there, and I believed that I aligned with it well, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so reading this book helped kind of just bring a lot more of this to light as to why do I feel comfortable being a part of this program, and that I like to believe that I'm part of this. I'm part of Triathlon. I'm part of Triathlon Nutrition Academy. And so that's why I recommend Start With Why. And there is a follow-on book that's called Find Your Why that I'm looking at right now. And we'll see where that takes me because like a lot of people like to try to understand their own personal why. And although a lot of us do know our why, I was talking with a Triathlon coach, not Chad, my coach. Was talking with the coach last week that explained that after reading this book,
controversial.
that after reading this book, he's changed
what you gonna do about that, Chad?
His mission statement in terms of the correspondence he has with his athletes about why what he's trying to do in his coaching. So starting with why.
It wasn't me, Chad. It wasn't me.
Or
it
me.
wasn't me.
Chad's a great coach.
I have a hunch it might be my coach.
It was it
was not your coach.
No, Tony was in the conversation.
I was there.
Oh, cool.
I saw it. I saw it. It was not your coach.
Well, I'd be curious about
curious
about the second book you're reading now, Kelly, because so much of what I talk to my athletes about, especially when they decide to dip their toes into long course training, and most of us are coaches or do long course, you have to have your why when things get hard. Either on the bike or on the run, you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I think a lot of our book recommendations kind of string through that to be able to, at the base, have something that's going to resonate and keep you moving forward to achieve your goals and how you break through that adversity. So I'd be really interested in that. The first book sounds good, but the second book, helping athletes tip into their goal. Oh, well, I want a medal. I want to finish. Well, that's not, when you're in a dark hole at mile 19 of the run, that's not going to get you there.
You don't care about that at that point.
You need something deeper to get you across that finish line. So I definitely talk about that with my athletes. I'm sure we all do. I'm sure you've talked to Chad about that or had your own internal dialogue when you're in that dark hole.
Yeah. All right. We'll add that as a bonus book. Start With Why and Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. I've read the first one many, many years ago. And yeah, you're right. Like, I think it applies to triathletes because you do need to understand why on earth you're doing this crazy sport in the first place, because it's not always, rainbows and unicorns and flowers and glitter. There are deep, dark holes in certain parts of a race and training, and you question like your whole ethos of why the hell did I sign up for this thing in the first place? So understanding why you do stuff, I think, just in training, but also life is really important. But I'm going to round us out with number 20. And if you do want to read all of these books in the next year, then you want to start with this book first. It's Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he has got some great evidence-based strategies to actually help you change habits, whether that's forming good new ones or getting rid of old bad ones that you don't want anymore. But he talks about the power of 1% and being 1% better each day. And I think that's really nice when we are overachieving triathletes and we want to go from here, like right at the beginning, all the way to the end game overnight. And we need to really just stop for a second and break that down into small, little, bite-sized, achievable habits and behaviors that you can achieve. And I always apply that habit stuff to nutrition. People have habits and behaviors that you've been set with for your entire life. It would have been shaped when you were a baby, or, early childhood, and all of the things that go with food, because it's more than just putting something in the pie hole. There are so many habits and behaviors and emotions that go with eating. So I think this is a great book for everyone to read. I would potentially start with this one if you do want to change or make some change, because it'll show you how to do that in a way that is maintainable and achievable. So you're not just going guns blazing, trying to go from zero to hero overnight. He also talks about the 4 laws of behavior change and how to actually set yourself up for success, as well as that temptation bundling. So I think if you haven't read that one, put that to the top of your list. It is number 20, but I think you should probably read it first. If you want to do anything with the sport or life, it's some great strategies to just be better in whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Alrighty, that is 20 with a bonus. So we're sort of 21 book recommendations for triathletes from triathletes. So I wanted to say a massive thank you to our Triathlon Nutrition Academy athletes for jumping on this podcast episode with me today. It's been fun. We've only talked over each other a little bit, but I think, you've got some great suggestions there and a huge list that you could really tackle. If you aim for 1 a month, you'd get through them in the next 20 months, or aim to do it in 2 years. So again, it's, achievable and maintainable. It's reading 5 or 10 pages a day to get through a book in a month. So if you want to download the list, go and grab it for free at dietitianapproved.com/books, books with an S. And we've got links there to grab them all as well. Or if you're an audio person, go and grab them from Audible or the library. And if you do sit on a wind trainer, read a book and listen to a book, please send me a photo. Take a photo on socials, tag me in it so that we can see you doing that. And then I want to know how much of that book that you then retain. All right, legends, thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you all in Power Hour soon.
Yay, thanks for having us.
Bye.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.